Recently I was asked to respond to this little video that was sent out by a guy named Russell Simmons, who is a fairly famous hip-hop record producer. So listen to what he has to say, and then I will add in my commentary afterwards.
I've been a vegan a very long time. I've been a vegan at least 25 years.
The impact that you noticed it having on your life was what?
If you go vegan because of the environment, obviously you know the #1 cause of global warming is the abuse of animals. By far, the #1 cause of global warming.
Well, because the carbon output of meat production is astronomical.
Right. So there are people who go because they care about the planet. There are others who go because it's so much healthier not to eat animals.
And so you have tried to take those lessons and educate people how?
African Americans are 3 times more likely to be vegan than their white counterparts in America.
Which was, when I heard you say that, that was a statistic that I thought was surprising.
It's surprising to some that African Americans have transitioned at such a huge rate towards veganism because they have the most diabetes. They have the most vegan.
All right, so a couple things. One, he is right about the fact that within the black community there are higher rates of obesity, higher rates of diabetes. That is true. And it's also right that blacks are more likely to adopt veganism than are other particular cultural groups. And I think that's unfortunate, quite honestly. I think that veganism is going to be perhaps a problem for many of them. And the reason that we see that most likely has to do with just socioeconomic reasons. You know, we see that diabetes, obesity disproportionately affects people of lower socioeconomic classes than other folks. And it's just a matter of the food you have access to. When you don't have a lot of money, you buy cheap, poorly nutritious food. And that's just the unfortunate reality of the way things work. There is no shortage, particularly in the United States, of very cheap, often tasty, but nutritionally awful food that's out there. Now, the things that I would sort of disagree with Russell Simmons about is the fact that he says that, you know, stop eating meat would be the best way to save the planet, or that meat eating is the #1 environmental driver of things like climate change. Now, that is just patently false. First of all, the data nowhere near supports that. Now, does food production have an impact on greenhouse gases? Sure, it does. Now, again, whether that drives climate change or not is certainly debatable, but that impact in the grand scheme of things is relatively small relative to other things. For instance, we know within the United States, for instance, that the combination of transportation, energy, and industry produce close to 80% of our greenhouse gases, whereas cows in particular produce around 2%. That's been seen, and that data comes from the EPA. Even on the worldwide scale, where we've heard numbers as high as 18%, 14% is more recently what's been quoted as far as greenhouse gas emissions go. That's based on a 2006 paper called Livestock's Long Shadow, which has then subsequently been revised, and even the authors have revised the data to a smaller number. But that still is a life cycle comparison where we all hear the, animal agriculture produces more greenhouse gases than do transportation. Again, realizing they compared what comes out of the tailpipe of a car versus everything that goes into creating animal products, whether it's transportation costs, whether it's packaging costs, whether it's infrastructure costs, whether it's, feed costs. So more fairly, if they were just to compare the emissions, the burps and methane from manure, direct emissions, that on a worldwide scale is about 5% for all livestock and about 3% for cows in specific. That's direct emissions. And then we also have to realize that biogenic methane, whether it comes from cows or wetlands, is largely part of a carbon cycle. We know that methane goes into the atmosphere, is broken down over a relatively brief period of time, and then returned back to the soil in the form of sequestered carbon. That's very different from deep carbon that comes out of the ground from things like mining and fossil fuels and things like that. So whether or not you believe climate change is real or not, that's beside the point. What is clear is cows are not the major driver of this. They are, if anything, a very small player in the grand scheme of things. And we have to realize, what do we get for it in return? Well, we get high quality nutrition. We get things like leucine and lysine and zinc, things that are not otherwise found in great abundance in most crops. And again, so to sort of make a blanket statement that cutting back on meat would be the best thing you can do for the climate is, if anything, it's completely false, but it certainly lacks nuance. And the other thing is, he states that the healthiest thing you can do is be vegan. Again, that is, also problematic. Now, I will grant that stopping to eat ultra-processed food, which makes up about 70% of the U.S. diet, would benefit anybody, no matter who they are. And that's what veganism often is. I mean, there are plenty of fat vegans out there that just continue to eat the junk food. But if you go on a whole food diet, yes, you're going to see an improvement. Now, some of the major criticisms of a vegan diet that we know are, or at least there's pretty good scientific evidence to show that, for one, bone mineral density, fracture rates are much higher in plant-based and vegan populations. We know that's clear. Now, the interesting thing about that is, in general, within the African American population, African Americans generally suffer less from osteoporosis than do Caucasians and Asians, for instance. And that may give them a little bit more tolerance to a vegan diet before they start breaking bones. But the other thing that we know about vegan diets is there is a high rate of mental health disorders that occur with vegan diets, particularly things like depression, which have been shown over and over again in many studies, particularly high-level, high-quality studies. The ability to heal has been compromised in vegan diets, as we've seen this. There are studies, randomized control trials and whatnot, that have looked at this and have shown difficulty with healing, not to mention the plethora of potential nutrient deficiencies that occur, whether it's vitamin B12 or things like, vitamin D3 or K2, or conditionally beneficial nutrients like carnosine, carnitine, creatine, anserine, and so on and so forth, choline, things like that. So in short, I think Mr. Simmons is wrong about his assumptions. A vegan diet is marginally better than a standard American diet, but only just so. And giving up meat is not going to save the planet, and it's certainly not going to make you healthier. Stop eating the processed food. Don't be sedentary, exercise, things I've talked about over and over again. All right, guys, hopefully it's helpful. You guys take care. We'll talk to you soon.